What's with all these cows? America seems to be obsessed with raising cattle for meat and dairy consumption. Throughout this project, I will be discovering and discussing the effects that unsustainable cattle raising has on the cows themselves, on humans, and on the environment. In 2017, the United States processed 32.2 million cattle and calves and 26.3 billion pounds of beef. That's a lot. Also in 2017, the average American consumed 216.9 pounds of beef. And in 2018, it was predicted that Americans would consume a record amount of beef, topping that of 2017. According to the World Wildlife Foundation, the mass production of cattle is unsustainable for the environment, and more specifically, the Amazon rainforest. Now, you may be wondering, why out of all topics would I choose cows? The number one reason for my interest is the inescapable environmental anxiety that people my age are facing. With social media, it is impossible to dodge the constant influx of information regarding the potential destruction due to climate change. Beginning this summer, I have begun doing everything I can to reduce my global footprint. The biggest change I've made is deciding to stop eating meat. Although this may seem like a big sacrifice, it hasn't been difficult at all. This made me question, why are people so reluctant to reduce their meat consumption when it could have a major impact on protecting our Earth? Did you know that by reducing meat consumption, you can also help reduce deforestation? It's even more effective than reducing your use of paper products. Much of deforestation is due to clearing trees for agriculture and livestock. Another reason I'm interested is because of the conditions cattle are raised in. A few years ago, while driving through Sunnyside, I noticed ranches of cows living on dirt, and they were eating hay out of metal troughs. So what's the problem, you may be asking? Well, we're grazing animals, but we often lack access to grass to graze on. So, why should you care? Because it is important to understand that if our nutritional needs are not properly met, the human consumer will be consuming inorganic products that also do not fill their maximum nutritional value. The reason that farms can get away with this is because the demand for product is so high that overpopulating fields is the best way to meet that demand. In class this year, we've briefly discussed CAFOs, and that is where I decided to begin my research. CAFO stands for Concentrated Animal Feeding Operation. This applies to many animals, but of course I will discuss its application to us. The biggest concern with CAFOs is the production of waste from the mass amounts of animals. We produce too much manure too quickly to be properly disposed of. Although it may seem small, manure is a form of harmful pollution. To get rid of the massive amount of manure produced by us, farmers either leave it on the ground or put it into artificial storage lagoons. This can cause watery manure to seep into the ground and pollute surface water. Once in the water, the manure can make its way into human, plant, and other animal water sources. Not to mention, it is completely untreated. There is a public health crisis due to unregulated CAFOs. So, this is not only a farmer and consumer issue, it is a public issue. Untreated manure contaminates the groundwater and surface water with nitrates, phosphorus, bacteria, and pharmaceuticals. The issue is especially relevant to Washington. The Washington State Department of Ecology proposed a draft CAFO permit under the Clean Water Act that revised and regulated dairy CAFOs and addressed the documented groundwater pollution problems. But it was met with backlash from farmers, and the revisions were eventually abandoned. This caused the current permits to be out of compliance with state and federal water regulations. Additionally, 3/4 of the pollution cleanup budget in Washington state was used to clean up water contaminated by agriculture in the years 2003 to 2015. So, as I mentioned before, the living conditions of these cattle is unnatural, which I do not agree with, but another problem has caught my attention. This summer, I heard about a controversy from a dairy brand called Fairlife. Videos were released of workers beating and physically abusing young calves. They are pushed and shoved around as the workers try to get them to behave. Since I already thought the living conditions were unfair to these animals, I'm sure you can imagine my feelings about the abuse they are also facing. If you still have not been convinced that something needs to be done to reduce cattle ranching, understand that all inhabitants of the environment are affected by this issue. If our environment is destroyed, all life will soon follow. You should also be particularly interested in this topic if you are a cattle rancher, a meat consumer, an environmentalist, or a landowner. Governments also may be affected if their land is being used for ranching or could be used for ranching in the future. People have turned to legal action to try and help reduce the problems caused by CAFOs. Industrial farms have faced lawsuits in the past, but this is not enough, especially because they're not always successful. Conflicting protections for farmers and neighbors have made lawsuits hard to pursue. People are forbidden to use their property in a way that harms others, but farmers are also protected from people trying to unfairly regulate farming. What can we do? Rhett Butler from the website Manga Bay speculates that unsustainable cattle ranching would be immediately reduced by eliminating tax incentives and land policies that encourage this type of ranching. Improved ranch management would also increase the productivity on the ranches that do exist, so that more land is not cleared for livestock. Although these are all steps in the right direction, the most impactful thing we could do is to educate people on this issue. This is a realistic and somewhat simple way to reduce these specific environmental problems, especially with help from the government. Creating government-ran programs to educate ranchers on the negative effects of their practices on the environment and how to reduce them would be very helpful. Additionally, informing the public through radio and television programs may reduce the overall demand for cow products and encourage people to support environmentally friendly brands. This is a simple solution if governments are willing to recognize this as a significant enough problem to spend money on fixing it. That being said, governments also need to start prioritizing the environment in general and investing in new sustainable technologies. So, what's going to happen? If we do not invest in ways to limit waste and pollution from cattle ranches and everything contributing to climate change, our world will soon face irreversible damage to diverse ecosystems and the health of all living organisms. If we do not begin integrating solutions to halt climate change, in the future we will have to make much more drastic measures to reduce emissions. We may reach a point in which ranchers face backlash, a reduced income, and rules and regulations that they have to jump through to continue their career. This is if the independent ranchers do not change on their own. We also may reach a tipping point where absolutely no more livestock can be supported. Therefore, consumers will be forced to reduce their meat consumption. I personally will have to reduce my dairy consumption, and this issue is continuing to contribute to the environmental mess that my generation will be faced with cleaning up. So, what can we do? Do not panic. It's not too late. Yes, this matter is urgent, but now that you know, use this information to make a positive change. Inform others on how agriculture and livestock affects diverse ecosystems such as the Amazon rainforest. Attempt to reduce your meat and dairy consumption. Be conscious when you do purchase those products and consider the environmental cost. Additionally, continue to reach out to leaders in the community and the government. We need our officials to take this situation seriously. The public needs to have easy access to knowledge about what is going on and how to help. A major reason people do not choose environmentally friendly products to begin with is because they're so expensive. Raising prices on products harmful to the environment, an environmental tax, so to say, will help discourage consumers from purchasing these harmful products. This way, environmental costs will already be added to the price of the item. So, throughout this presentation, I've discussed the effects that cattle ranching has on our environment. So, think about this a little bit and think about ways that you can reduce your global footprint in face of our climate change crisis.